Hi, and welcome to another episode. On today's episode, I will be discussing the printers like the Mimaki I've got here, i.e. large format printers. But this is most probably will be quite a lengthy video, and as such, I will try to divide it into sections that you would be easily able to navigate on the YouTube timeline. So hopefully you will easily find the material that is relevant to yourself, whether it is you're looking to buy a Mimaki machine, whether it is you're looking in general, whether you need this type of machinery, or you don't know what these types of machines are for, and therefore you need some general information. When would you need a large format solvent printer? Primarily, these would be used for stickers that would go on a large surfaces. So for example, you could do a bus sticker, let's say, or you could do a window graphics. But these machines are not limited to that. Obviously, you can print your banner media, your roll-up banners, and mostly you would not want to do small type of stickers on them, because the UV printers are better suited to perform these tasks. As well as you would not want to print fabrics on these types of machines, because the technology and inks behind them is also different. So if you're looking to print banners and large format stickers, a solvent ink machine, a large format one, would be the one to go. If you would want to print on bags or textile, you would have to look for a different type of machine again. Now that we've established that, let's say you do not need to print on textile, you do not need a flatbed, you would like to have a solvent printer, and obviously as this is a Mimaki, I'll be telling you about them. So let's see what models the Mimaki has and how do you differ them if you are just starting your journey in wide format printing. So the Mimakis will have an identifier, usually, if it's not, because usually this is just a sticker, so some people might lose it, but usually you would have a combination on the Mimakis that consists of some letters, a number, a dash, and another number. Now, at first it would look like it's confusing, but obviously you would need to somehow select your model. So the easiest way to know is if you need to print on textile, there would be somewhere here, there would be a letter T. So obviously this is not our case, so we will skip to different models. Now, from the 3 letters and 2 set of digits, the last digits will tell you about the size of the machine. So 160 is referring to width of the machine and the media it can handle. Obviously this can vary, it could be, usually it's less than that, but 160 is pretty much the biggest if we do not speak of flatbeds and so on. 160 would be the larger size machine, so the lower this number after the dash, the narrower your machine would be. Now the first digit that you see is referring to a model in 2 ways. There is an old generation and there is new generation. So in this case, as you can see, there are 3 digits. If there would be 2 digits, so it would be 30, 160, that would be the first generation machine of this sort. That is not the only thing how you can identify the machines. So as the Mimaki has advanced their technologies, they've developed a multi-print head machine, which is this one. Now, if instead of 300, you will see 150, that is the same size machine. It utilizes the same colors, most probably. But the only difference is the print head. That is, the 300 will have 2 of them, and the 150 will only have one. The last thing to discuss would be the letters themselves. Now, in this case, this is a CJV. The C would refer to, well, I mean, let's start with the T. T we already know is going for textile. If you see an F, that is for flatbeds. At least that's how I tend to memorize it. But if you see an F, that would mean it's a flatbed. It's a different type of printers, although they can use the same technology. Moving on, the CJV, the C stands for, at least in my mind, stands for cutter. So if there's a C, the machine will be able to cut it for you. If you don't have a C at the front of the letters, you will have to have a separate dedicated machine that will be doing the cutting for you. Now, obviously, if we just take the C off, it leaves us with a JV. JV is a printer, so you can find a Mimaki JV 300-160. That would be just a large printer with no cutting options. And this is how you will distinguish what it is, the machine that you're looking at, whether it's just a printer or it is a combi machine. Now, which one to go for will depend on your personal preferences. And although we do have a cutter combo, I'd say for the most part, if you've got the option to do so, and if you've got the space to accommodate the machinery, I'd say go for the separate units. Now, continuing, the CJV can also be with another letter at the front, the UCJV. That U is for UV inks. As I've mentioned before, this machine is using, that is, if there is no U, it's just CJV or JV, regardless of the rest of the numbers, it will be printing using solvent, eco solvent inks. Now, if you add the U, or you see a U at the front of the letters, that will be a UV type of machine. It will, if it has a C, it will obviously be with a cutting option, and if it's just UJV, it will obviously be just a printer. Now, the UV machines are more used for stickers because they can usually create a good base, and using transparent media, for example, their inks, the UV inks, would not be transparent for the most part, although there are a few exceptions and the technology does vary a bit more than just that. But the story to be short, this is how you begin distinguishing the devices when you're looking at them. So just to repeat, the JV is a printer, a letter C will add a cutting option onto the machine, and UCJV would mean it is a UV ink machine where the letters, the first set of digits giving you the model of the machine, as in whether it's a one print head, two print heads, third gen, second gen, and so on. The last set of digits will represent the width of the machine and the media that it can handle. As any printer, as you can see, the Mimaki is, when left alone and is switched off, will run through its maintenance cycles. It is cycling the inks in order to prevent the print head drying up, and as such it should be plugged in at all times to the power, and it will wake up automatically when it is the time to do so. In general, the Mimaki wide format printers will not come with a 3-phase, only if it's a flatbed, and even there are some exceptions, but in general the smaller Mimaki models will come with a not even 240 volt 30 amp plug. It will have two your standard C13 plugs, a kettle plug that will go into your regular sockets with no problems whatsoever, so you won't need to install anything extra in order to run these machines. By default, the most common setup option for the inks on these machines is a CMYK. Yes, different options are possible for with white or orange or silver or other colors. However, it is not recommended to go with them unless you have the utilization for them, meaning that if you cannot use them, you will end up either wasting your inks on the cleaning cycles, or you will be end up with a machine that's having inks just stuck in there and not being used. This is why the most commonly used color setup is CMYK, and when purchasing the machine from brand new, it is not set up to any of them, so you're free to choose any color setup. When you're purchasing the used machine, it comes with whichever color setup it comes with. It is possible to change it, but obviously it includes swapping a few parts and cleaning, flushing the inks and installing the new sets and so on, dampers, cleaners and whatnot. So it is possible, but I would strongly advise against that because it's nothing but a bunch of waste. And again, unless you're not planning, but actually have a use for them that will utilize them on pretty much every single print, then I would say just stick with the CMYK setup, at least for the very beginning, until you can decide whether you want the additional colors or not. Speaking of the inks and the ink delivery themselves, the machines, the Mimaki machines, for the most part, will be using a cartridge system. Now, this is obviously not the original intended Mimaki system. This is a third-party cartridge with refillable bundles on top of that. There is nothing wrong with using a third-party inks as long as you know what you're doing and you're using a trusted supplier to do that. There are several of them and there are several types as well. As you've seen, the bundle on top is one option. There are bigger bundles available on the market that would go on top of your machine itself. It would be like a big box with the inks held inside, and it holds a much greater capacity. It's like 3 liters or 5 liters. It's ridiculous amount of things, but obviously if you're constantly printing, that is exactly what you will be looking after, because you would be tired of changing the things every single day. That being said, the cartridges themselves, I do believe, hold around 400 milliliters of ink, and it is quite significant amount, obviously depending on the fill that you're doing. The thing you can see here is the take-up roll. Usually when you're printing a long pieces of material, you don't want to be sitting here and after you printed a meter or so, the media going on the floor or jumbling up or causing head strikes and whatnot. So there is a take-up roll. The take-up roll is stationed on the metal tube below it, and it can be adjusted on both sides depending on the media width, and your roll will be adjusted to that. Not only it can be set up on this end by loosening this knob to the exact size that you require, it can be positioned towards left or right as well, because both of these things do have the adjustment knobs that if you loosen them, you are able to move both of them. So if you're running a shorter media, you can station it at the middle if you would like to do so, although I'm not sure why you would be doing that, but it is an option to do. Now, that thing is just a holder, whereas on this side, it actually has some wires coming in, and it has a few options for you to choose. Mainly being on and off. This only allows you, it doesn't mean that you will be able to turn it off completely if you don't need it. No, it will still run. But if the roll is being forwarded one way or another and you want it to stop, you just press the on off button and it will obviously stop winding or unwinding. And the second thing you can do is change the direction which the roll is spinning, and that is out of the electrical controls. Now, there is one more thing that you need to keep in mind when working with take-up rolls, and that is the tension. You don't want it to be too loose and you don't want it to be too tight. And in order to adjust that, there is an option for you to do so at the end of this roll. So by adjusting this, you will be adjusting the tension on the take-up roll. Now, in order to secure the media that's coming off of the printer onto the take-up roll itself, usually what I do is use a single piece of a tape. So when your media is coming down, bear in mind, if you try to use the take-up roll with the roll cutting, it would not be as sufficient because the roll constantly moves up and down. It would be a pain in the neck to set up this way. So I suggest using this option only when you are printing the material that will not need to be cut by the machine itself afterwards. So what you do is you take a piece of tape, and depending on your media width, you find roughly the centerpiece. And bear in mind, the machine is currently printing, or it will be usually printing. When are you doing that? And you bring the centerpiece with the tape attached to the tube itself, and you keep the tension using your fingers and just that tape piece, and you attach the tape to the take-up roll. That's pretty much it. This is how you attach. It should be centered. If you're holding the tension while you're applying that, once the media goes past it, you will have to note to actually squeeze the corners in or tighten the corners in. And after you do that, you will have to double check that the behind roll is going in and it's rolling under the next layer. But this is pretty much it, and this is how you set up your take-up roll, and this is how you also use it. Once the machine finishes, you cut off the label, it will roll onto itself, you apply another piece so it doesn't unroll, and this is pretty much the technology behind using the take-up roll. In order to load the media into the machine, you've got again two ends where you load your media to. One end is connected to the lever. It is duplicated on two sides, and it does serve the purpose of holding the media in while you haven't done your final adjustments. So in order to load your media, usually you keep one end always at one side and you adjust your second end. So you secure one side in, you move the second piece together, you tighten your screws, you open up the rollers, you pass the media just enough for it to be under the rollers, you close the lever again with the rollers, and you proceed from the other side. Once you're on this side of the machine, you can see the primarily lever on this side and the media that you fed on this side. Now, to note, there should be two, although not all of the used machines come with them for whatever reason. There are two end pieces that try and help to keep the media where it's supposed to be and lessen the possibility of a head strike when the media curls up, and if the printhead will go over them, that could cause a head strike and you might lose a very expensive part of the machine. That being said, we leave the lever once again, and now we pull the media through. Now you want to feed the media about 15 centimeters past everything. in order to avoid more options, you press down the lever back to lower the rollers. Now, important thing to say is that the rollers can be adjusted only when the levers are in the up position. You can move them right and left. Now, there are a few notes on them as well. You can only station your rollers between the two triangles that are on the metal counterpart. If you leave your rollers within the perimeters of the two metal cutouts, they will work, and if you leave them somewhere else, the machine might not accept the rollers, they might not function, and they will be excluded, and your media will go all over the place because it might deform, or it should not, but it might deform while printing. So, continuing to loading the media. There are two metal stripes, if you will, on each side of the machine. The media must not exceed these two lines. If you will cover, let's say when loading, for whatever reason you will cover this line here, the machine will not be able to pick up the media. It will report you back an error saying media undetected or something in that manner, and it will not work. So when you've ensured that you've left a bit of wasted media at the front, you can secure it with the end caps, if you will. And this is when you know when all of your rollers are also set up through the whole media, then you obviously can start working with the machine. Once your setup of the paper has been complete, or sorry, the media, now it's time to turn on the machine itself. You do so by clicking once and releasing the end/power button. After you've clicked that, it will light up and it will begin the powering on procedures that it needs to go through before it can begin to work. It will go through a few things, and you might encounter some errors if there's something wrong with your machine in this step, but obviously if everything's alright, it should work just fine. During the power on of the machine, it will ask you two things. It will ask you what type of media are you inserting, i.e. rolls or sheets. Although I'm not sure who's using sheets to work with these machines. Anyway, it will ask you whether the media is ready to be measured. When you press the measuring button, it will move the print head, as the print head does hold the sensor. It will physically measure the width of your media, and that will give you out a reading that is synced with your software in order to make it work. After it will read the media, it will ask you how many rollers you've got set up, because that's the only thing you can't read. So in this case I'm using all 7 of them. However, if I'm using the narrower media, I could also be using 7 if I move them all together, or I could be using just 4 of them, let's say, if it's a roughly half a roll or a narrower media, or maybe just some banner material. Once you've gotten to the step where your media is loaded, your inks are fine, the machine has been powered on, now it's time to proceed with printing or print and cut job. Unfortunately, or maybe fortunately, the wide format printers, specifically Mimaki, will not work as your typical home printer or even digital printers that you use potentially within your manufacturing or at home. This type of machinery will need a specific software. Now, the Mimaki by default, even used, should come with a raster link. While I'm not a fan of the raster link that comes with the Mimaki software by default, sorry, with the Mimaki machines by default, because it usually needs some sort of add-on, be it a CorelDRAW or Fine Cut, I think it was called, or an Adobe Illustrator one that allows you to combine the layers, the cutting layer, let's say, with the printing layer. I prefer using a third-party software. In my case, that is FlexiSign. It is quite an expensive software, however, it offers a multitude of things you are able to do. Yes, you are able to perform them with the raster link as well, but it will be a pain in the neck to actually operate that piece of software, although that's only one man's opinion. However, now that we are prepared to print, all we've got to do is to send our file with the instructions from the RIP software. I apologize for the crude screen grab, if you can call it that way, this setup. This is only to be able to show what exactly is going on quite fast. So you can see the RIP software I'm using at the back, and this is the production manager. That's additional piece of software that comes with the whole thing. The main thing we need to look at is the printing status, that is the status itself, which it says printing 3%. Now, as you can see, it's not printing anything. Now, why would that be? In order to start printing, the Mimaki needs to be set up correctly, and while I've already shown this exact screen, it will not do so while it is in this state. This is exactly why you've got the remote button that's here and activated by function 3, and this is the only time when the machine will actually print. Now if we press the remote, it changes from blue to green, and the machine actually starts doing something. This will conclude the first episode of the very basics of the wide format printers, what they do, why would you need one, and how do you know which model you are actually after. Now I'll need to finish this print that I started, because that's an actual order that I need to print and not just an example, and I'll leave you to actually have a look how this comes together. See you on the next episode.